When a man who has shared 6 decades of his life with a woman he loves discovers, just before her death, that everything he thought was true might not be, it's a cuts deep into the heart of trust, love, and identity. For Jack and Eleanor Peterson, their marriage had been the stuff of quiet admiration, a testament to enduring partnership in an age where such longevity is rare. They were inseparable, or so it seemed. But as Eleanor lay frail and fading in the hospital bed, she whispered words that would unravel Jack's understanding of their entire life together. "There's something you need to know." The room felt smaller than usual, its sterile walls closing in on Jack as he sat by Eleanor's side. The hum of machines monitoring her fragile condition filled the silence between them. Outside, autumn leaves tumbled across the parking lot, but inside, time seemed frozen. Jack held her hand gently, feeling the weight of every year they'd spent together pressing down on him. He had always believed theirs was a perfect union, not without challenges, certainly, but built on honesty and mutual respect. Now, staring at Eleanor's pale face, he braced himself for what she might say next. Jack and Eleanor met in 1963, during a summer festival in their small Midwestern town. She was working at a booth selling homemade jams, her laughter ringing out like wind chimes against the backdrop of live music. He was there reluctantly, dragged along by friends who insisted he needed to get out more. When their eyes met over a jar of raspberry preserves, neither could have guessed how profoundly that moment would shape their lives. Their courtship was simple: long walks through fields of wildflowers, late-night conversations about dreams they hoped to chase, and promises made under starlit skies. Within 2 years, they were married, standing before family and friends in a modest church ceremony. Life wasn't easy. They faced financial struggles, health scares, and moments of doubt. Yet through it all, they stood side by side, weathering storms as only those deeply connected can. Now, 60 years later, here they were, at the end of a journey neither had anticipated ending this way. As Eleanor gathered her strength to speak, Jack leaned closer, his brow furrowed with concern. "Jack," she began, her voice barely audible, "I've carried this secret for so long. I couldn't bear to take it to my grave without telling you." Her words hung heavy in the air, each one landing like a stone dropped into still water. Jack's mind raced. A secret? After all these years? What could possibly remain hidden after 6 decades of sharing meals, raising children, and growing old together? Eleanor paused, her breathing shallow, as if summoning the courage to continue. "Do you remember when we first moved to Chicago?" she asked softly. Jack nodded, though confusion clouded his expression. Of course he remembered. It was one of the most pivotal decisions of their lives. Leaving behind the comfort of their hometown for the bustling city had been daunting, but it was also exciting. It marked the beginning of new opportunities, a fresh start. "Well," Eleanor continued, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond him, "there's something I never told you about why we left." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Why they left? That decision had been clear-cut, or so he thought. Eleanor explained haltingly, her voice trembling with emotion, that their move hadn't been entirely voluntary. There had been whispers in their hometown, rumors that followed them like shadows. Rumors about Eleanor's past, things she had done, choices she had made before meeting Jack, that she feared would destroy the life they were building together. At the time, she convinced herself that leaving was the only way to protect their future. And so, they packed up their belongings and started anew, burying the truth beneath layers of distance and time. As Eleanor spoke, tears streaming silently down her cheeks, Jack struggled to process what he was hearing. How could she have kept this from him? Didn't she trust him enough to share the burden? Anger bubbled beneath the surface, mingling with sadness and disbelief. But then, looking at her frail form, he realized the enormity of the guilt she must have carried all these years. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about survival, about love expressed in ways he hadn't understood until now. In the days that followed, Jack found himself revisiting memories of their life together, searching for clues he might have missed. Had there been signs? Moments that hinted at the weight Eleanor bore silently? He recalled arguments they'd had early in their marriage, times when she seemed distant or evasive. At the time, he chalked it up to stress or fatigue. Now, he wondered if those moments held deeper meaning. Despite the shock of Eleanor's revelation, Jack resolved to stay by her side. Love, he realized, isn't just about perfection. It's about forgiveness, acceptance, and the willingness to face even the hardest truths together. In her final days, they talked openly about everything: the joys, the regrets, the secrets that had shaped them. Though the knowledge changed things between them, it didn't diminish the bond they shared. If anything, it deepened it, reminding Jack that true connection transcends even the most painful revelations. When Eleanor passed away, Jack felt the full weight of her absence. Yet amidst the grief, there was clarity. Her confession had forced him to confront not only her vulnerabilities but his own. It taught him that no relationship is ever truly free of secrets, but that doesn't mean it's any less real or valuable. Love, in its purest form, is messy and imperfect, yet capable of enduring even the toughest trials. In the months that followed, Jack often returned to the lessons Eleanor's secret had imparted. He began volunteering at a local community center, helping others navigate their own struggles. Through these interactions, he discovered a renewed sense of purpose. Life, he realized, is too short to dwell on what could have been. Instead, it's about embracing what is, and finding beauty in the imperfections that make us human. And so, Jack carried forward the legacy of their love, honoring Eleanor not by dwelling on the past, but by living fully in the present. Their story, though marked by unexpected twists, remained a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Because sometimes, it's not the secrets themselves that define us, it's how we choose to move forward once they come to light. Jack's decision to volunteer at the community center wasn't made lightly. At first, he resisted the idea, unsure if he could handle being around people who were struggling when his own heart still felt so raw. But one rainy afternoon, as he sat alone in the house that had once been filled with Eleanor's laughter, he realized something. Staying locked in grief wouldn't bring her back. It wouldn't honor the life they'd built together or the lessons she'd left behind. So, with a deep breath and a quiet determination, Jack walked into the community center, ready to face whatever came next. The place was buzzing with activity. Kids playing board games in one corner, seniors chatting over cups of coffee in another, and volunteers bustling between rooms. Jack felt out of place at first, like an outsider looking in on lives far removed from his own. But then a woman named Clara approached him. She was warm, with a no-nonsense attitude that reminded him of Eleanor. "You must be Jack," she said, extending her hand. "We've heard great things about you." He chuckled nervously. "I'm not sure what you've heard, but I hope it's good." Clara smiled knowingly. "Don't worry. You'll fit right in." His first task was simple enough: help organize donations for families in need. As he sorted through boxes of clothes and canned goods, Jack found himself thinking about Eleanor again. Would she have approved of this? Probably. She always had a soft spot for those less fortunate, often sneaking extra groceries into care packages for neighbors without them knowing. The thought brought both comfort and pain. Comfort because it kept her memory alive, pain because he wished she were there beside him, sharing in the work. Over time, Jack became a regular fixture at the center. He started leading workshops for seniors on how to use technology, a skill he'd picked up late in life thanks to Eleanor's insistence. "You can't keep avoiding the internet, Jack. It's not going anywhere. Watching older folks light up when they sent their first email or video called a grandchild gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. One man, Harold, joked, "If I can figure out Zoom at 82, anyone can." Jack laughed along, but inside, he felt a swell of pride. These small victories mattered. Still, there were moments when the weight of Eleanor's secret pressed heavily on him. Late at night, lying awake in bed, he'd replay her confession in his mind. Why hadn't she trusted him sooner? Did she think he wouldn't understand? Or worse, did she believe he'd leave? The questions haunted him, even as he tried to focus on the present. During one particularly difficult evening, he called their daughter, Sarah. They didn't talk often. Life had taken her to another state, but hearing her voice always grounded him. "Dad," Sarah answered, concern evident in her tone. "Is everything okay?" "I don't know," Jack admitted, his voice cracking slightly. I keep thinking about Mom, about what she told me before she passed." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, softly, Sarah said, "Do you think she ever doubted your love for her?" The question caught him off guard. Doubt his love? Never. Not once. And yet, maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe Eleanor had loved him so much that she feared losing him, even to the truth. Sarah continued, "Mom carried a lot of guilt, Dad. I think she wanted to protect you more than anything. That doesn't mean she didn't trust you. It means she trusted you too much. To stay, to forgive, to keep loving her despite everything." Her words stayed with Jack long after they hung up. For the first time, he saw Eleanor's secret not as a betrayal but as an act of love, one born out of fear and insecurity, yes, but love nonetheless. It didn't erase the hurt, but it softened it. Slowly, he began to let go of the anger that had lingered in the corners of his heart. At the community center, Jack met a young woman named Maria, whose story struck a chord with him. She was raising 2 kids on her own while working 2 jobs, barely keeping her head above water. When she opened up to him during a support group session, tears streaming down her face, Jack felt a lump rise in his throat. "I feel like I'm failing them," she confessed. "Like no matter what I do, it's never enough." Without thinking, Jack reached out and placed a hand on hers. "Maria," he said gently, "you're doing the best you can, and sometimes that has to be enough." Later, reflecting on the conversation, he realized how much he sounded like Eleanor. She used to say similar things to him when he doubted himself, when he worried he wasn't providing enough, wasn't being enough. In that moment, Jack understood something profound. Eleanor's love hadn't just shaped him, it had prepared him to offer that same kindness to others. As weeks turned into months, Jack noticed subtle changes in himself. He laughed more easily, found joy in the little things again, and even started dating someone new, a widow named Margaret whom he'd met at the center. Their relationship was slow and cautious, built on shared experiences of loss and healing. Margaret didn't try to replace Eleanor, nor did Jack expect her to. Instead, they leaned on each other, finding solace in companionship without the pressure of recreating the past. One day, while flipping through old photo albums, Jack stumbled upon a picture of Eleanor from their early days in Chicago. She looked radiant, standing in front of their tiny apartment building with a smile that lit up the frame. On the back of the photo she'd written, *New beginnings. Together forever. Reading those words now, Jack felt a pang of bittersweet nostalgia. They had faced so much together, both the highs and the lows, and somehow their bond had endured it all. He decided then to write a letter to Eleanor, not to send, of course, but to process his own thoughts. Sitting at the kitchen table with pen and paper, he poured his heart onto the page. "Eleanor," he began, "I miss you every single day. There are times when I'm angry, confused, and sad. But there are also moments when I feel closer to you than ever before. Your secret changed me, yes, but it didn't break me. If anything, it taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, even when it hurts." By the time he finished writing, tears blurred his vision. Yet he felt lighter, as if releasing those words had freed something inside him. Love, he realized, wasn't static. It evolved, adapted, and grew, even after loss. In the years that followed, Jack continued volunteering, mentoring, and living fully. He became known as the guy who always had a kind word or a listening ear. People gravitated toward him, drawn by his warmth and wisdom. Though Eleanor was gone, her influence lived on, not just in Jack's actions but in the ripple effect of compassion he spread throughout the community. And perhaps that was the greatest legacy of all. Not the secrets we keep or the mistakes we make, but the love we choose to give, even in the face of imperfection. Because in the end, it's not the secrets that define us. It's the courage to move forward, to forgive, and to keep loving anyway. One crisp autumn morning, as Jack strolled through the park near the community center, he noticed a young man sitting on a bench, staring blankly at the ground. Something about the way the man sat, shoulders slumped, head bowed, reminded Jack of himself in the weeks after Eleanor's passing. Without overthinking it, Jack approached him. "Mind if I join you?" he asked gently, gesturing to the empty space on the bench. The man looked up, startled, then nodded silently. For a while, neither of them spoke. Jack watched leaves swirl in the breeze, their golden hues catching the sunlight. Finally, the man broke the silence. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong," he muttered, almost to himself. His name was Daniel, and he'd recently lost his job. He felt like he was failing everyone who depended on him, his wife, his kids, even himself. Jack listened intently, nodding occasionally, but mostly letting Daniel vent. When the words finally slowed, Jack turned to him and said, "You're not alone, you know. Everyone feels like they're drowning sometimes. But trust me, you'll find your way back." Daniel blinked, surprised by the sincerity in Jack's voice. "How do you know?" he asked hesitantly. "Because I've been there," Jack replied simply. "And let me tell you, it doesn't last forever." That conversation stayed with Jack long after they parted ways. It reminded him of how powerful connection could be, how a few kind words or a shared moment of vulnerability could make someone feel less invisible. Over time, these interactions became a cornerstone of his life. Whether it was helping Daniel navigate unemployment resources or simply lending an ear to someone overwhelmed by life's challenges, Jack found meaning in being present for others. But it wasn't always easy. Some days, the weight of other people's struggles felt unbearable. One particularly tough afternoon, Jack sat in his car after leaving the community center, gripping the steering wheel tightly. A single mother had broken down in tears during a meeting, confessing that she didn't know how she'd feed her children that week. Jack had done what he could, connecting her with local food banks and offering emotional support, but it didn't feel like enough. As he sat there, frustration bubbling inside him, he wondered, was he really making a difference? Or was he just putting band-aids on problems too big to fix? The answer came unexpectedly later that evening when Sarah called. She rarely reached out unannounced, so Jack knew something was up. "Dad," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to talk to you about something." Her tone sent a jolt of worry through him. Had something happened? Was she okay? "I've been thinking a lot about Mom lately," Sarah continued after a pause. "About everything she went through, and everything you went through because of her secret. I guess I wanted to say thank you." Jack frowned, confused. "Thank you? For what?" "For forgiving her," Sarah said softly. "For loving her anyway. It gives me hope, for my own relationships, for my kids, for everything. If you can love someone through something like that, maybe I can handle whatever comes my way too." Her words hit Jack like a wave, washing away some of the lingering doubts he'd carried. Maybe he couldn't solve every problem or erase every hardship, but he could offer something just as valuable: empathy, understanding, a reminder that no one is truly alone, no matter how dark things seem. With renewed determination, Jack threw himself into his work at the community center. He started organizing monthly gatherings where people could share stories, struggles, and triumphs over coffee and homemade pie. These meetings quickly became a lifeline for many attendees, including Daniel, who eventually landed a new job and brought his family to one of the gatherings to thank Jack personally. Seeing the gratitude in Daniel's eyes filled Jack with a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt in years. Still, there were moments when Jack allowed himself to grieve, to miss Eleanor deeply and ache for the life they might have had without secrets between them. On the anniversary of her death, he visited their favorite spot by the lake, where they used to sit and watch the sunset. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of pine. Jack traced his fingers along the weathered wooden bench they'd claimed as their own all those years ago. "I miss you, Ellie," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm trying. I'm doing my best to live the way you'd want me to help others, to keep going, to love again. I hope you're proud of me." As he sat there, memories flooding back, Jack realized something important. Eleanor's secret hadn't defined their marriage. It had tested it, yes, but it hadn't broken it. Their love had been strong enough to withstand even that revelation. And now, it was guiding him forward, teaching him how to extend that same grace to others. Months later, Jack received a letter from Maria, the young mother he'd met during the support group session. She wrote about how much his encouragement had meant to her, and included a photo of her smiling children. "You helped me believe in myself again," she wrote. "Thank you for reminding me that I'm stronger than I think." Reading her words, Jack felt a lump rise in his throat. This was why he kept showing up, why he kept giving, even when it was hard. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest ripples. By the time winter rolled around, Jack had settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. Margaret joined him for holiday dinners, bringing warmth and laughter into his home. Together, they decorated a tree with ornaments from both their pasts, blending traditions in a way that felt natural and comforting. Though Jack still thought of Eleanor often, he no longer felt consumed by grief. Instead, he carried her memory with him like a cherished keepsake, tucked safely in his heart. On New Year's Eve, as fireworks lit up the sky, Jack stood outside with Margaret, watching bursts of color reflect off the snow. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. "The future," Jack replied honestly, "and the past, and how lucky I am to have both." Margaret smiled, squeezing his hand. "Here's to new beginnings," she said softly. "To new beginnings," Jack echoed, raising an imaginary toast. In that moment, surrounded by light and love, Jack understood something profound. Life isn't about avoiding pain or pretending everything is perfect. It's about finding beauty in the messiness, strength in the struggle, and hope in the healing. Eleanor had taught him that, even if it took 60 years and a terrible secret to fully grasp it. And so, Jack stepped into the new year with an open heart, ready to embrace whatever came next. Because love, he realized, isn't confined to one person or one lifetime. It's a force that moves through us, shaping us, connecting us, and reminding us that we're never truly alone. As the months rolled on, Jack found himself becoming more involved in the lives of those around him. It wasn't just about volunteering anymore. It was about truly connecting. One Saturday morning, he helped organize a community cleanup event at the park where he'd first met Daniel. The turnout was better than expected, with families, teenagers, and even some local businesses pitching in to clear litter and plant new trees. As Jack handed out gloves and trash bags, he couldn't help but smile. There was something deeply satisfying about seeing people come together for a shared purpose. During a break, Daniel approached him, holding a cup of coffee. "You know," Daniel said with a grin, "you've got this way of making people feel like they matter. I don't think I ever thanked you properly for that." Jack chuckled, brushing off the compliment. "I'm just doing what anyone would do." "No, you're not," Daniel insisted. "Most people wouldn't take the time. You did. And it made all the difference for me." Those words stuck with Jack long after the cleanup ended. They reminded him of Eleanor, how she always had a knack for making others feel seen, even when life got messy. He realized now that her secret hadn't diminished who she was. It had simply added another layer to the complex, beautiful person she'd been. And maybe that was the lesson he needed to carry forward. People aren't perfect, but love doesn't demand perfection. It demands presence. Still, there were moments when Jack wondered if he was overstepping. Was he trying too hard to fill the void Eleanor had left behind? One evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sunset, Margaret joined him. She didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the railing and let the quiet settle between them. Finally, she asked, "Do you ever feel like you're running from something?" Jack hesitated, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, losing Eleanor must have been devastating. Are you sure you're not throwing yourself into all this to avoid facing your own pain?" Her words hit home in a way Jack hadn't anticipated. He thought about the countless hours he'd spent helping others, the late nights planning events, the constant need to stay busy. Was Margaret right? Had he been using his work as a shield? The next day, Jack decided to take a step back. Instead of heading straight to the community center, he drove to the cemetery where Eleanor was buried. It had been months since his last visit, and guilt gnawed at him as he walked up the familiar path. When he reached her grave, he knelt down, tracing the engraved letters of her name with his fingers. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I've been so focused on moving forward that I haven't stopped to sit with you, to really grieve. I miss you, Ellie. So much." Tears streamed down his face as he finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of his loss. For so long, he'd pushed it aside, telling himself he needed to be strong for everyone else. But sitting there, alone with Eleanor's memory, he understood that strength wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about facing it head-on. When Jack returned to the community center later that week, he felt lighter somehow. Not because the grief had disappeared, it never would, but because he'd given himself permission to feel it fully. That shift changed the way he interacted with others. He listened more intently, offered advice less frequently, and simply showed up when people needed him most. One afternoon, while sorting donations, he struck up a conversation with a teenage girl named Lily, who often volunteered at the center. She was shy, rarely speaking unless spoken to, but Jack sensed there was more beneath the surface. After weeks of casual chats, she finally opened up to him about her struggles at school and home. Her parents were going through a bitter divorce, and she felt caught in the middle. "Sometimes I wish I could just disappear," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack's heart ached for her. "I know it feels impossible right now, Lily, but trust me, you won't always feel this way. Things will get better. And until then, you've got people here who care about you, including me." Lily looked at him, tears welling in her eyes. "Why are you so nice to everyone?" Jack smiled softly. "Because someone was nice to me when I needed it most. And I guess I want to pay that forward." Over time, Jack became a steady presence in Lily's life, checking in on her regularly and encouraging her to pursue her passion for art. When she won a scholarship to a summer program, She ran straight to the community center to tell him. "This is all because of you," she exclaimed, hugging him tightly. "No," Jack corrected gently. "It's because of you. You worked hard for this. I just reminded you that you're capable." By the following spring, Jack had become a cornerstone of the community, not because of grand gestures or dramatic acts, but because of the quiet, consistent ways he showed up for people. Whether it was mentoring kids like Lily, supporting struggling parents like Maria, or simply lending an ear to someone having a bad day, he embodied the kind of compassion that inspired others to do the same. One evening, as he prepared to leave the center, Clara stopped him. "Jack, we couldn't do any of this without you," she said earnestly. "You've changed so many lives, including mine." He shook his head, embarrassed by the praise. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." "Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it," Clara replied with a wink. "We need more people like you in the world." That night, as Jack drove home under a canopy of stars, he reflected on how far he'd come since Eleanor's passing. Grief still lingered, of course. It always would, but it no longer defined him. Instead, it coexisted with gratitude, purpose, and love. He thought about the ripple effect Eleanor's life, and even her secret, had created. Without realizing it, she had taught him the true meaning of resilience, loving deeply, forgiving freely, and finding light in the darkest places. When Jack arrived home, he noticed a package on his doorstep. Inside was a framed photo of him and Eleanor, taken during one of their trips to the lake. On the back, Sarah had written, "Love isn't erased by loss, it's carried forward. Thank you for showing us all what that means." Tears filled Jack's eyes as he held the frame close. In that moment, he knew Eleanor would be proud, not just of the man he'd become, but of the legacy of love he continued to build. Because in the end, it wasn't about the secrets we keep or the mistakes we make. It was about the connections we nurture, the kindness we share, and the courage to keep moving forward, even when the road ahead feels uncertain. And so, Jack stepped into each new day with an open heart, ready to embrace whatever came next. Because love, he realized, isn't confined to one person or one lifetime. It's a force that moves through us, shaping us, connecting us, and reminding us that we're never truly alone. The framed photo of him and Eleanor found a permanent spot on Jack's living room mantel, right next to the jar of raspberry preserves she'd insisted they buy during that first summer festival so many years ago. It was funny how objects could hold such weight, how a simple picture or an old jar could carry the essence of someone who was no longer there. Every time Jack glanced at them, he felt a mix of sadness and gratitude. Sadness for what he'd lost, but gratitude for what he still had. Memories, lessons, love. As spring turned into summer, Jack noticed something unexpected happening within himself. He wasn't just healing, he was growing. The pain of Eleanor's secret didn't sting as sharply anymore. Instead, it had become part of their story, a chapter that shaped him in ways he never anticipated. And while he would always wonder about the what-ifs, he realized that dwelling on them wouldn't change anything. What mattered most was the present, the people around him, the connections he was building, the impact he was making. One particularly warm afternoon, Jack decided to revisit the park where he and Eleanor used to walk hand in hand. The trees were fuller now, their branches heavy with green leaves, and the path they once strolled along seemed narrower than he remembered. As he wandered slowly, he spotted a young couple sitting on a bench, laughing together. They reminded him so much of himself and Eleanor when they were younger, full of dreams, unspoken promises, and a love that felt invincible. Watching them, Jack smiled softly, feeling a pang of nostalgia but also a deep sense of peace. Love like that wasn't fleeting. It transformed, adapted, and endured even in loss. Later that week, Jack received an invitation from Lily, the teenager he'd mentored, to attend her art exhibition at a local gallery. She'd been working tirelessly on her pieces, pouring her heart into every brushstroke, and this was her first big showcase. When Jack arrived, he was amazed by what he saw. Her paintings were vibrant, raw, and deeply personal, each one telling a story of struggle, hope, and resilience. One piece, titled "Through the Storm," stood out to him. It depicted a lone figure standing under a dark sky, lightning cracking above, yet somehow radiating strength. "That one's my favorite too," Lily said, appearing beside him. "It's incredible, Lily," Jack replied, his voice filled with admiration. "You've got real talent." She blushed, looking down at her feet. "I couldn't have done it without you believing in me." Jack shook his head firmly. "No, Lily. You did this all on your own. I just reminded you of what you already knew. You're stronger than you think." After the exhibition, Lily hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for being here," she whispered. In that moment, Jack felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was why he kept showing up, for moments like these, where love and support created ripples far beyond what anyone could imagine. Back at home, Jack sat on his porch, sipping tea and watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. Margaret joined him, bringing 2 slices of pie she'd baked earlier. "Peach?" she asked with a grin, knowing it was his favorite. "You know me too well," Jack said, accepting the plate gratefully. Margaret settled into the chair beside him, glancing at the framed photo of Eleanor inside. "Do you ever talk to her?" she asked gently. "All the time," Jack admitted. "Not out loud, usually. But I feel her everywhere, in the little things, the big things, the choices I make. She's still with me, in a way." Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "That's beautiful, Jack. Not everyone gets to love someone like that, or be loved like that. You're lucky." "I am," Jack agreed, his voice soft. "And I'm learning to carry that love forward, not just for myself but for others too." As the days passed, Jack continued to balance his life between helping others and honoring Eleanor's memory. He started writing letters, not just to Eleanor, but to people who had touched his life in meaningful ways. Some were long, others brief, but each carried a piece of his heart. To Daniel, he wrote about resilience. To Maria, he expressed pride in her journey. To Lily, he sent words of encouragement, reminding her to keep chasing her dreams. Writing became another form of healing for Jack, a way to process emotions and celebrate connections. One evening, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, Jack stumbled upon a shoebox filled with letters Eleanor had written to him over the years. There were notes tucked into lunchboxes, birthday cards, even random scraps of paper with doodles and jokes. Each one brought back vivid memories, making him laugh, cry, and marvel at the depth of their bond. At the bottom of the box, he found a sealed envelope addressed to him in her handwriting. His breath caught in his throat. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "My dearest Jack," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone. Please don't spend too much time mourning me. Live fully, love deeply, and forgive freely, including yourself. You've given me more happiness than I ever deserved, and I hope you'll continue sharing that light with the world. Thank you for being my partner, my rock, my everything. With all my love, Ellie." Tears blurred Jack's vision as he read her words over and over again. It was as if Eleanor had known exactly what he needed to hear, even after she was gone. Her letter wasn't just a goodbye. It was permission to move forward, to embrace life with the same passion and kindness she'd always shown him. In the weeks that followed, Jack made a conscious effort to live by Eleanor's final wishes. He reconnected with old friends, tried new hobbies, and even traveled to places he and Eleanor had dreamed of visiting together. Standing atop a cliff overlooking the ocean, he whispered, "Ellie, I wish you were here to see this. But I know you are, in a way." By the time autumn returned, painting the world in shades of gold and crimson, Jack felt like a different person. Not entirely healed. Grief wasn't something that vanished, but whole in a new way. He had learned to carry Eleanor's love with him without letting it weigh him down, and in doing so, he had discovered a deeper capacity for compassion, connection, and joy. On a chilly November morning, Jack stood before a group of volunteers at the community center, preparing to lead a workshop on storytelling. "Life is messy," he told them, his voice steady and warm. "It's full of secrets, surprises, and struggles we can't always understand. But it's also full of beauty, if we're willing to look for it. My wife taught me that. She taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. So today, I want us to share our stories, not just the happy ones, but the tough ones too. Because those are the moments that shape us, connect us, and remind us we're never truly alone." As the room erupted into applause, Jack felt a surge of gratitude, for Eleanor, for the people around him, for the life he was living. Love, he realized, wasn't confined to one person or one lifetime. It was a force that moved through us, shaping us, connecting us, and reminding us that we're never truly alone.